Hello and welcome to this video, which is an overview of qualitative research. I'm Kristen Kinsevich, a doctoral student at Regent University in the Counselor Education and Supervision program. This video will cover types of sampling strategies in qualitative research, 5 major approaches to qualitative research, validation of qualitative research, and ethical considerations. The material is adapted from Creswell and Poth, 2018, Qualitative Inquiry and Research Design, choosing among 5 approaches. First, let's talk about sampling strategies. These are just several of the ones that are listed on page 159 of Creswell and Poth, but I thought these were probably the most frequently used. So you have snowball or chain sampling, and that's when you find people of interest, maybe a group of people that you know, and then they find other people who they know, and then those people find people they know, and so you just kind of create this snowball or chain effect. Also, you can look for a typical case, particularly in a case study or a narrative, where it's a specific normal or average case that you're looking for to kind of pose as an example. You can use purposeful sampling as well, in which you're looking for specific people. And there's 2 ways to do this. You can have a random subset of your kind of chosen population. So that could be, parents who have children with muscular dystrophy. And so you might find kind of, maybe through online groups or support meeting groups, a subset of that specific population. You can also have stratified purposeful sampling, in which there's kind of layers and multiple subgroups within your chosen sample. There's also criterion sampling, and that's when you select a handful of cases that meet a specific criteria that you've set. So counseling supervisors who are African American and at the doctoral level and under 60. So you'd have to look for specific people that meet your criteria. And then a convenience sample is really whoever you can easily find or access. And that can save time and money, but may not always give you the most clear picture of the thing that you're trying to study. So it would just really depend on your methodology. So let's talk about the methodology and 5 major approaches. There's narrative, phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, and case study. And for each of these, we will examine appropriate uses, establishing a problem statement or research questions, data collection, data analysis, and writing the results. First, the narrative approach is used to tell an individual's story. And so the problem statement or research question really surrounds kind of why this story needs to be told in order to illustrate maybe a broader problem. And so data collection would involve interviews and written answers from the persons that you're trying to tell their story. Data analysis would present or look for kind of sub-stories and themes, and maybe even create a chronology of the story that they're describing. And then when you write up the results, you really want to capture the story and themes as the participant described it, so as authentically as possible. So an example would be maybe a study that tells the story of a young adult who rose from poverty into acceptance at an Ivy League school. And maybe that would illustrate, some possibilities for inner city children or things like that. So it would have to be, kind of a reason that this story is worth telling. In phenomenology, you would use that to describe the experience of a lived phenomenon. So the problem statement or research question is really surrounding what is the lived experience of this specific phenomenon. So data collection would involve interviews and possibly written artifacts if they were created kind of at the time of the event or the experience, that kind of captured it while they were in it in some kind of way. Data analysis would identify significant statements called meaning units. So you're kind of looking for these phrases that kind of capture the essence of the experience. And then when you write up the results, you start by describing the essence of the experience, and then you support that with quotes. So an example would be a study that examines the experiences of first responders in New York City on September 11th, 2001. And so that would just tell what it was like for them to be in that place at that time. Grounded theory would be used to develop a theory based on the data that you're gathering. And so the problem statement or research question is kind of surrounding like how or why is this population doing something a certain way? And you're going to create a theory about that based on what you gather. Data collection, you do need a little bit of a larger sample. So 20 to 60 interviews is considered normal for a grounded theory study. Data analysis involves several layers of coding where you look for kind of repeated words or common themes, and you go through a larger process of open coding and then axial coding and selective coding to really kind of formulate your theory. And so you might have, you think of like umbrellas, there might be one big umbrella over the whole thing, and then there's kind of sub umbrellas or processes that are happening. So you're looking for what exactly is happening and how can we capture it. And then when you write the results, you're reporting the results of your coding and you're presenting and defending your theory. And it can be helpful to create an infographic that displays your theory and kind of how you see the data supporting your theory. So an example, and this is what my group had done in our qualitative research class, developing a theory of how and why counseling supervisors make decisions when values conflicts arise for their supervisees. And so it presents something that then could be useful in training other people on how to do it. So that would be an example. An ethnography is used to describe and explain shared patterns in a culture or group. And the problem statement and research questions revolve around what cultural patterns are evident that might help us better understand the population. Data collection might involve observation, time in the field, interviews, kind of being in the ethnic group or the culture that you're trying to describe. And data analysis then would describe the culture and the themes that you observed and heard about. And writing the results would really paint a narrative focused on these themes and patterns. So an example would be perhaps a study that describes cultural decision making in migration of Syrian refugees in Europe. So kind of what patterns are there in where they go and when they leave and why, now phenomenology would describe kind of the lived experience of being a Syrian refugee, let's say, and what is it like for them. Whereas the ethnography would be looking more for the patterns within the group. So that's a distinction to pay attention to. A case study would be used to give an in-depth look at a case or a set of cases. And the problem statement or research question is really asking kind of what happened in this program or this case that we could learn from. So data collection would involve things like interviews, observation, documents, artifacts, just anything, any data that maybe if you're studying like a program, for example, that they have collected already. Data analysis would look for themes of the case and also potentially cross case themes if you're using, let's say, a few cases to kind of be in one case study. And then writing your results could be kind of a linear description of this is what happened, start to finish, or it could be nonlinear. And you can summarize what happened and support that with vignettes. So that's a helpful way to write that up. And so an example would be a study that describes the strategies and outcomes of a smoking cessation group. So again, this would be qualitative research that would be published for the purpose of helping inform other, our knowledge base or other types of programs, as opposed to a program evaluation where you might look at the strategies and outcomes of a smoking cessation group solely for the purpose of that group. And so those results wouldn't be published. It would be for their own personal information. So it's important to note the difference there between qualitative research and a program evaluation. Now, how would you validate a qualitative research study that you're reading? How do you know? Because there aren't stats that say, okay, P is less than 0.01. So here are some ideas on what to look for to understand if it's valid research. Number one, you want to look at, does the focus of the study match the methodology that they chose? Were the sampling and data collection methods appropriate to that methodology? Does the study present data clearly? Were the ethical guidelines clearly followed? Does the study present an outcome of some kind? And did the researcher demonstrate reflexivity in the article and or in a disclosure statement? So if it's not clear kind of why the researcher chose to do this, and maybe there's some conflict of interest, obviously that would call into question the validity. And finally, ethical considerations. You want to make sure, if you're doing qualitative research, to get the appropriate permissions, like from the HSRC or from your organization. You would want to disclose the purpose of the study to your participants and not lie to them. You want to respect the population that you're working with. And if you are going on site or in the field, you would want to keep your disruption to a minimum. Obviously, you want to maintain confidentiality and clearly and honestly state authorship when you publish. And finally, you want to share all of your results accurately. So even though there might be something that you're wanting to describe, perhaps as you've researched, you came across something completely different, and qualitative research has that kind of feel to it where things can really shift and change as you go along and discover things. And so certainly it would be unethical to kind of bury some results that didn't fit with what you were hoping would happen. Hopefully you're going into research looking for discovery and meaning and truth, and not trying to paint a specific picture for a reason. But obviously, if there is a conflict of interest or something like that, a company could, want to create a case study that paints them in a favorable light or things like that. So it's important to make sure that your results are presented accurately. Hope that's been helpful, and I'll see you next time.